Welcome to another episode of Awesome Lessons in History with Mr. Goff, your favorite teacher. Today we're going to be talking about the Civil War. First things first, little review. Why did the Confederate States, or the South, what were they so unhappy about? You back home? Can't hear you. But it's the election of Lincoln. They were not happy about this new Northern president. So, going into 1961. Beginning of the Civil War starts with Fort Sumter. And it's a fort on an island in Charleston, South Carolina. And what happens is it's demanded to be surrendered by the Confederacy, and it's not. And Lincoln says he'll send troops. Doesn't make the Confederates so happy. They start to bombard the fort overnight on April 12th, 1861, and then the next day, April 13th, it surrenders. So this begins the Civil War. Before we get too into detail about the Civil War itself, the Civil War, yes, everyone knows, freed the slaves, and that's excellent that it did. But the main reason why Lincoln was fighting the Civil War was to save the Union. So think, we had the United States before this piece of paper. Think of the map. I can't draw. So what happened was, we have the North and the South, two separate entities now, and what Lincoln wants to do is he wants to fix it. So he's going to take his tape. He's going to save the Union by taping it together. You hang on 1 second, it'll be all better. This is what Lincoln wanted, North and South United States again. So that's why he fights the war. Now going into the war, we have different advantages. South advantages. They had the better generals. Most of the war was fought on their home soil. Remember with the American Revolution, we had home soil, we won. Also, they had the better fighters, they had the better army. And they were also hoping for foreign support from Great Britain and even France. The northern advantages were they had the better railroads, they were more industrialized, they had a stable government, and also they had more people. They were hoping to outlast the South. So we begin the war, we start fighting. Kind of goes back and forth. South is kind of winning, which is surprising everyone, hoping for this foreign support. Maybe they'll get it, maybe they'll not. We'll see in a second. And then what happens is Lincoln suspends habeas corpus. That's the people's right that they're not imprisoned for. They need to have a reason to be in prison. But he suspends this in the border states, and this is because he wants to keep those states in the Union. Those 4 states. Check that map out on your notes. And those blue states there that border the North and the South. And he suspends this right, and it really shows the power that the president can take during wartime. Think of our past president and what he did during 9/11 with the Patriot Act and tapping phones without having reason, and FDR during World War II. We'll learn about that later this year. And so he suspends habeas corpus. Think of that cartoon with the boy and the son just watching TV, and in comes the army just to arrest him. If during rebellion and times of war, the president's power always increases. So we begin the war. It's going in the South's favor. And then we have the Battle of Antietam, which is one of the single bloodiest battles in U.S. history up until that time. It killed a large portion of both the North and the South, and Lincoln got a little upset because his generals, which he didn't have very good generals, he had sucky generals for a long time. It takes him a long time to actually get good generals like the South. And what happens is at Antietam a lot of people die, and it's very bloody, but it kind of was enough of a victory for Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And throughout Lincoln's presidency and throughout the Civil War and even before his presidency, I think it was very Two-Face. Think of the character in Batman, Two-Face. I know this analogy sucks, but you want to have... He'd tell the North, in Illinois, he had a speech where he said, I'm in favor of freeing the slaves, yada, yada, yada. In the South, he told them that, oh no, I'm not going to free the slaves. And he went off his audience. If he knew they were pro-slavery, he'd say, so is he. If he knew they were anti-slavery, he'd say, so is he. So he didn't really care about freeing the slaves, I'll put it that way. And it was all about whatever it took to save the Union. So in 1863, he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, and it declared freedom for all slaves in the Confederate States, not the Union or border states. Remember that. And so that's huge because it sets off, it really turns foreign powers off, like France and Britain, to helping the Confederacy, because remember, they are anti-slavery. And it also, it leads a lot of, like, the slaves in the South really start to join and fight in the North. And why is that important? Because they're not going to fight for the South if they're not going to gain freedom. They're going to fight for the North if they're promised freedom. And that really helps the North out. And then next we have, which really is the last, and the last time that the Confederates really have any hope of winning this war, is Gettysburg. And what happened in Gettysburg, it's a 3-day battle, and at Gettysburg, it's the Lee in the South, General Lee, he invades the North, and what happens is they kind of hold off, push him back, and again, Lincoln's generals fail to capitalize and don't chase Lee and capture him, but it really led to the United States victory. And so, after that, we have General Sherman, kind of goes through Georgia from Atlanta to Savannah, burns the South, basically crushes it. Really, this war really kills the South, and you're gonna, in the next episode of Awesome History here with Mr. Goff, you're gonna see how the South was really destroyed, and this whole idea of Reconstruction happens. And General Lee is gonna surrender to our future president Ulysses S. Grant in 1865, and you can say that Lincoln definitely achieved his goal of taping up the North and South. Now, he didn't, the South is left, let me do something here for you, left in pieces, so we need to fix it. And that's going to lead to Reconstruction. But Lincoln's reelected in 1864, and then a year later, on April 14th, he's shot by a guy named John Wilkes Booth. And that leads to our next president, Andrew Johnson, who he takes over, and he's going to kind of lead Reconstruction. And you're going to see how radical it can get and how wishy-washy it gets. And it really, yeah, the blacks were freed, but you're going to see that in the next couple of units, their freedom wasn't what they were really hoping for, and it wasn't what we would consider freedom. So, Mr. Goff, signing off. I'll see you in class tomorrow.